thank you so much, Melody, for taking the time here to be with us on the Caregiving Relief podcast. I'm going to just do a quick introduction first. So, when Melody Ann's youngest daughter was still an infant, her mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Sandwiched between the two generations, Melody learned to grow personally while being the family caregiver. On the one hand, she cared for children who would one day grow their own wings. And on the other hand, she cared for a mother whose quality of life and time on earth had been shortened by a diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's. Melody strived to keep a sense of herself and her sanity while providing the love and care both for her children and her mother needed to live out their best lives. Thank you so much, Melody, for being here with us.
Thank you, Kelly, for having me.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your experience with caregiving and some of the challenges and how you overcame them.
I feel like I've spent a lot of my life caregiving at this point. I have my eldest is 26. And so I'm going to say 27 years of parenting, because parenting starts before they're born. As soon as you realize you're going to have a child, you're like, parenting starts. Right. What you put in your body and what you do and how you think and how you plan, and I spent over 10 years looking after my mom. Most people with an Alzheimer's diagnosis live about 3 years. And I always joke that my mother always liked to skew the statistics, right? So she lived over 10 years after her diagnosis, which is a very long time to live with Alzheimer's. And I looked after her throughout that journey, both while she was at home and then when she was placed in a care facility when I could no longer lift her and she didn't have the mobility to be on her own. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel you. I had that. I ran into that too. And then my dad had to go into the nursing home. Yeah. Before you started caregiving, how was your life before and after you started?
Well, as you mentioned in the bio, I had an infant child. So I think my daughter was 18 months to 2 years when I started looking after my mom. Mm-hmm. And so I was in family mode. I had a preschool. I had a child who wasn't even ready for preschool, right? She wasn't ready for school at all at home. Mm-hmm. And I had another one that was just entering the school system. Mm-hmm. She was at the beginning of her school journey. Mm-hmm. And so I was very much in family mode. Mm-hmm. And so, and I guess I was in a sense in caregiving mode, right? Looking after my kids, but I wasn't expecting to have that third person to look after, especially so early. My mom had not even retired yet by the time she was diagnosed. So my mom actually never had a retirement. She was, in her 60s when she was diagnosed, early 60s. When she was, I believe, early 60s when she was diagnosed. And so she was still working. So there was a little bit of a surprise. It was like, oh, wait, what? So that was what my life was like before. It's very much in family mode.
Mm-hmm. And then you took on having to care for your mom as well.
Yes, absolutely. I did.
How did it start off?
Yeah. So my mom was living in another province, actually. And so we were thousands of miles apart. So I live in Canada. My mom was in Ontario and I was in British Columbia. Canada's a pretty big place. Those are 4 provinces apart. And so, my mom was diagnosed and it's like, well, what is she going to do? Who's going to care for her? How is this going to work? So my mom, after getting an Alzheimer's diagnosis, had to pack up, sell her home, pack up her things, get rid of what she thought she didn't need, and then bring everything else to British Columbia. And while she was doing that, we decided to rent her an apartment. So I was looking for an apartment to rent for her because I didn't want to move her in with my kids. I had young kids who were like noisy and I thought that would be a bit much for her. So I was looking for an apartment within a block or two, or a few blocks of my home, so that she would be near enough. So I was going out buying furniture, securing an apartment, convincing the landlords that the Alzheimer's patient would be okay alone, that I was going to look after her and be there and put all the safety precautions in place. I actually found a wonderful landlord. His mother had passed of Alzheimer's. And so he was really understanding and a lovely, lovely human. but I was buying furniture, and we were figuring out, well, are we shipping plates? Am I buying plate? All of a sudden there's this whole new
home you had to take care of.
Right?
Yeah.
All these things, right? You bringing your fork? Should I buy forks?
Yeah. Totally. I hear you.
And so it was just, and there was only so much time. And so it wasn't about, well, let's, this is 10 years from now. It's like, no, this is happening now, and we had better get it done. And so plan now, do now, right? There wasn't a long planning process in this. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Wow. And it must not have been easy for your mom to be in that condition and then moving completely into a new environment.
Yeah. She left all her friends.
Wow.
She left. She had to quit work early. She had to give up her working life early. She had to quit the choir. She had to move away from all her friends. In fact, you get a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, and then it's like, and we're going to move you away from almost all of your support system.
Right? Yeah.
Right?
Gosh.
Devastating. Absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
But there was no one there who was going to do that, the hardcore caregiving later on. And so it was determined, move now while you could still, make some friends and have some actual, life here, and you could have some sort of foundation before you forget. Right. And before the awful stuff that Alzheimer's hands out happens to you. And so that was why she moved a little bit before she needed full-time care. So to establish and found a new church and, all the things that my mom wanted to do, right? New choir. My mom was very interested in church and singing, and she played the piano. So that was something that I helped her find for herself, because that was important to her.
Wonderful. Was she able to make new friends in the new place and go to church?
She did. Yeah, she did. We, because it's one thing when a person goes to church, that's the one thing you get. You kind of get this automatic community, right? When you move to a new town and you don't have, and it doesn't have to be religion, but you don't have a thing, right?
Yeah, a hobby Right.
It's hard to build community, but for some reason, when you show up new at a church, you're just kind of like, you're now part of that community. And that was really beneficial to her, I must say.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. What do you feel was your biggest struggle when you finally take on that whole role, like caring for a human, right?
Yeah. Oh, so many struggles, right? As you know, there are so many struggles. So my biggest struggle, I think, it was just maintaining my own sense of self and trying to find support. I'm going to name two. Just maintaining my own sense of self, like maintaining some sort of me, right? Not being consumed by all the caregiving, and getting the supports I need to do that. I think that was probably the biggest challenge.
Okay. Did you have friends to support you as well in that?
I did. I had a couple of really, really good friends that actually sometimes would just go and visit my mom or take my mom out for a ride in the car.
Right.
Because so I did have a couple of really good friends that were helpful as much as they could be. I mean, they had their own lives,
of course. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying they visited weekly or anything, but they were there and they listened to me when I needed to talk things through.
Right.
I tried not to lean on them too much. And then there were people, who were at the beginning were very supportive of my mom, but my mom's Alzheimer's went on and on and on, and they got so tired and they disappeared. And there's no blame in that. I'm not saying they shouldn't have. It became overwhelming for them, and I understood that they had to go away. They couldn't do it anymore. And I think that's one of the things you have to realize for other people in the scenario and for yourself, right? At some point, you can't let it fully consume you, right? There was a point in looking after my mom. She was in the care facility, and I got really, really depressed, and I realized I need to take a break. She's in a care facility. I can take 3 months off. Yeah. I can, and I still had to go to the monthly medical appointments but I can take a little bit of time for myself and just reestablish my mood and how I'm
Your
facing
identity. Yeah.
and but that was also guilt laden then, right? Then you get the guilt. And so then you have to work through the guilt. And so that was really tough, but it was important I realized that walking away for a short time was important just to make sure that I could maintain some semblance of sanity, continue down the path, right?
Yes. So you finally gave yourself permission to go and take that break.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah. Exactly. It's wonderful. Did you ask for help when you were going through that phase?
I did ask for help. I learned a lot about the people in my life and who had the capacity to help and who did not have the capacity to help. There were people I was hoping would have the capacity to help who didn't. And I had to realize that. And it's easy to get angry at that and feel bitter about it. But at the same time, understanding that different people have different capacities, and some people just don't have the capacity, the emotional capacity to deal with caregiving over an extended period of time, and they can't support someone who's doing it. And there's a lot of things I had to let go of the attachment to that, right? Like I'm attached to the fact that this person should be more supportive. You just have to let go of that. Otherwise you become angry. And I didn't want to become an angry person or a bitter person. That doesn't, I've always said I'm built happy.
Yeah.
So I've always wanted to just stay in, understanding. It's like, yeah, okay. So what I was hoping from you, that didn't materialize.
Yeah.
Move on, right? Right.
Absolutely. Having that expectation does make it seem more difficult when they don't meet it. So
yes,
better just accept where they are. Yeah. Wonderful. The people that you ask for help, do you have siblings too, or is it just you?
Yep, I have a brother. He does not live where I live. And so he could not be a hands-on person. And that was just a fact. Yeah. And so you just have to, that's a fact, right?
Yeah.
I have to say my brother and I did a fairly good job. He looked after the finances because I said, what can you do? Right? Tell me what you can do.
Yeah.
And he said, well, I can do anything that I don't need to be in person for. And so he took on some of those roles.
Yeah.
I still had to deal with finances because I was making financial decisions and things like that. I tried to involve him as much as I could. But at the same time, I was the hands-on caregiver. And so if that was my role, then I needed to have the decision-making. And I think he understood that. Like, I think he got that. And I think he was, in some ways grateful that I took it on because then he felt secure that our mother was cared for. So he would things he didn't have to worry about things, right? And when we did run into problems, we had open conversations about them. We didn't always agree, but for the most part, we managed to listen to each other. So, and I've heard horror stories about families that didn't do that. And so I am grateful for that piece. Yeah, it's hard enough without infighting in the family, right?
Yeah. That's wonderful. The communication is so important too, right? When we have other people helping, and really it's so important to just have one person make the calls, because when there's so many people, like a democracy, then it's hard to get a consensus. So that's wonderful.
I agree. So I was the point person on medical decisions, and I kept him informed. And when there was big decisions, I would, we'd listen to each other. My mother had a do not resuscitate plan in place, and we had a number of plans in place. And one of the things when we drew up the plans was that my brother and I, although he was looking after the finances and I was looking after the day-to-day care, that we both had control of each. And so there was no, if the doctors were making life-ending decisions, I said it needs to be in the legal documents that they will consult both of us, because I'm not going to be the only person making those decisions. I refuse.
Yeah, it is tough, especially when they ask about the advanced directive stuff.
Yes, exactly. So the day-to-day, me 100%. But any of the big decisions, I wanted my brother to have a voice, because I didn't want him to come back later and say, I didn't get a voice, and that was really, really important. You know. So
yeah. What kind of support do you feel could have made your life so much easier? What's the one thing that would have made things lighter, like the burden?
I would have liked more just looking after me stuff, right? There was no one, I was looking after everyone, and there was no one looking after me. My partner, he just didn't have the capacity. Just like when it got emotional, he would hide. He'd stay at work. He wouldn't come home. He'd, hide, come home and do more work. I would have liked, more hugs, more, like, it's going to be okay. You're going to make it through, more encouragement. I would have liked a lot more of that for my partner and my family. Just, I see what you're doing. I see the hard work you're putting in, and thank you. And
Acknowledgement.
Anything? Yeah. Can I do anything for you? How can I support you? Can I just do you want a day off? Can I do something special for you? That, just those little things would have made a world of difference to just, how about, can I just look after you? I'm coming to town. Can I just look after your kids while you just have a day to go for a walk, or, read a book, or, all these things that you don't seem to have, don't have time to do because you are raising children, doing the volunteer work at the schools, taking them to their athletics, cooking the meals, cleaning the house, and looking after this patient with Alzheimer's, which is also a full-time job, right? I felt like I had 3 full-time jobs, and I just would have liked to be appreciated. So out there, if somebody's looking after an Alzheimer's patient or an elder person, just show some appreciation of it. Say thank you, give them a hug, give them a day off, bring a small gift, however they receive love.
Yes.
Do something. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be a big thing, but something small. I would have loved that. And a support group. I did try a support group, but I wasn't a good fit. And looking back, I should have started my own support group. I should have said, there's got to be other people like me, and started my own support group, something that suited me.
Yeah. What would that look like?
Everyone would be a sandwich generation person. So looking after small children and looking after an Alzheimer's patient, or someone with dementia, or, some form of elder care. It wouldn't even have to be Alzheimer's. But if I had known more people who were what I call the sandwich generation, right? The elder parent, the children, and they're both, the bread's pressing down, and you're the substance that pulls them together, right? I would have liked a support group like that, but not one that, it's like just drinking wine on Friday night and complaining. Not that.
Yeah.
Like where we helped each other with self-care, right? We helped each other with our, with our mental health and our physical health and that kind of thing, like support in that way, not support in the complaining.
Yes. The venting.
Not that.
Never ending. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that other kind of support. It's like, hey, do you have a moment? Let's go for a walk.
Yes. Like a healthy distraction, right?
Yeah. And do you want 5 minutes to vent? Go. And at the end of those 5 minutes, we're going to work on something positive for you that's going to raise your energy level. That's going to help you feel better about what, about yourself and your path.
So true. Like positively structured. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. Yeah. That would have been great too for me. Like I felt the same way with the support groups I joined. I was like, this is bringing me even further down while listening to this, the venting. I mean, venting is fine and healthy, but when you keep doing it, it brings everyone down, I feel. But that's why wherever I went, I would talk to other people, and as a healthy distraction from all the worries that was going on here, right? What's one thing you might do differently, if anything, in this whole
I would have found more positive people going through the same thing to support me. I think I would have done more standing up for myself at home. I have needs. I'm doing all this work, and part of being in a partnership is to look after one another. So I need some care. Yeah, I think I would have stood up for myself more.
Yes,
communicate. It's one thing I would have done. It's because, and it sounds strange. It's like maybe, people are thinking, oh, well, maybe you should have done something better for your mom. But I'm doing better for other people was part of that was looking after myself. And if I wasn't looking after myself well enough, then I couldn't raise the bar elsewhere. Right. And so, and I think I did an excellent job, but, fighting for myself, I just didn't have the energy. Right. It's so hard to find the energy when you're in the middle of it.
Yes.
To fight for something that you're like, oh, I can do without. We'll just deal with it later. We'll deal with those relationship problems later. But I don't think in the end is a great idea. Right?
No, absolutely not. And I feel it's so important to communicate, right, what our needs are. And it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't have to be complicated. Like it could just be like, hey, this is what I need. Can you give some of that to me?
Yeah. And when it doesn't happen, say, please remember that this is a relationship. It's not me doing everything and looking after everything you want and you ignoring me. That's not a relationship, and that won't last. And so we need to work on this, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. How do you feel creativity played into your caregiving?
A lot. A lot. Because every time you walk into the facility, for example, you don't know where your loved one is going to be. Right. So, I remember once I walked in and my mom went, "Hi, Mom, that's my mom." And somebody looked over and says, "That can't be your mom. She's a lot younger than you,"
Right.
And so, and being creative around it. There was another patient who was a banker, and he was always at the elevators. This is an Alzheimer lockdown unit, right? And so you couldn't get out without a code. He was always at the elevators trying to get to the bank because he was a banker and he thought he was still in that world. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't get into the elevator until I distracted him. And so I'd understand his story. I was like, oh, but I saw they put the newspaper over there for you by your favorite chair. Have you read the headlines yet? And of course, even if he'd forgotten, he's like, oh, that's a good idea. And why don't we go over there? I'll get you a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or whatever you want, juice. I'll get the paper for you, read the headlines, and then go to the bank later. He's, oh, okay. And I, put arm in arm, and we'd walk back together, and so I had to, find ways to creatively work with people who lived in a completely different reality than I did. Mm-hmm. Right. And I had to, something really important, I had to meet them where they were. Yeah. It was always really important to every time I sat with my mom, it was like, so where are you today? Are you my mom? Today, are you my daughter? Are you a princess? Are you looking for your husband? Are you in school? Are you, where are you today? Right. And then how can I creatively work with that so that we can have a quality moment?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. That's huge. Yeah. Like adapting to where they are and being creative with interacting with that kind of energy where they are. Yeah.
And I noticed sometimes other families, they thought they were doing their loved one a favor by trying to bring them to this reality. Yeah. And and watching that, I just saw a lot of tension and stress and friction. Both sides were really unhappy at the end. So I just decided, no, wherever she is today, that's where we're living, and we're just going to play fantasy every day. And that's fine.
Yeah, I think the struggle and a common mistake a lot of us make, because it's so hard to accept at the beginning, is that there's no making heads or tails of what's going on in their condition and the trajectory of their condition. Like every day is different. Yeah. And just, being okay with that is key, I think, to moving forward with them and being creative with how they're evolving every day.
Yes. And how can I bring quality within that? Mm-hmm. How can I bring us a quality moment within that?
Yes. And honestly, do you feel like your mom and you got closer through this whole new dynamic?
I think that I learned to let go of a lot of things. Mm-hmm. So, with your parents, right? You have like, my mom did this, my dad did that. You know what I mean? We're holding on to this stuff. Like somehow our parents weren't allowed to be human and make mistakes as they were raising us, right? Yes. Then you become a parent and you're like, oh, darn, right? Yeah. I made this mistake, I made that. And, and so, when my mother became very vulnerable, right? She was completely dependent on me, just like my infant child was. Yes. And that therein lays great responsibility. And so, letting go of any of that, letting go of all of that past and just saying, this is where we are now. That became really important. And that helped me grow up as well. Right.
Yeah.
There's lots, it sounds hard, but there's also lots of good in it if you look for it.
Absolutely. And you said it, there was a key word there, now. Like, this is how we are now.
Now.
And like from this point on, right? This is a new life, essentially.
Yeah. In this moment, which might be different in an hour, but in this moment.
Yes, absolutely. Because they're changing. Even we are changing, not just when our loved ones with dementia are changing. So like accepting us too, where we are. And like
exactly.
together.
Forgiving myself for not being able to do it all and be it all. And
Yeah. And who can be, right? It's just a lot of pressure we put on ourselves. So if we let go of that, and I say add more pleasure, less pressure, right?
Yeah.
Because that's huge too. Self-care and like being good where we are, and then helping, like if we're good where we are, we struggle less and our loved ones would struggle less, right?
Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. So one last question for you. How do you think so we were just talking about changing, right? How do you feel you've evolved and grown and transformed during the caregiving phase as well as after?
Yeah, I think I've grown a lot, right? My organizational skills are amazing. I had to organize so much.
Yeah.
My self-awareness is much greater. I can, and even in today at work, a lot of what I do when I'm working with clients is meeting them where they are and understanding and really listening empathically and understanding where they are, and then understanding their goals and their dreams and where they want to be, and then helping them move to that. So organization skills, self-awareness, meeting people where they are, being creative, and having faith in myself. I was like, you're constantly solving all these problems, your kids and your mom, and you don't, all these, and being a problem solver. I've learned to validate people, and without having to live their experience. Right. So a lot of us, and I used to be the same. It's like, well, I don't get that. I've never experienced that. I don't get that. Yeah. Right. And I can say now, I don't know where you are, and I'll never understand that, and I've never lived that, but I can understand that must be a really heartbreaking place to be. And so being able to speak to people in this way and validate, even though I don't have that same experience, so that I could go on and on and on. I learned so much meeting. Yeah. And I learned how to calm people down who were angry, because sometimes Alzheimer's patients get they pace and they get, do you know what I'm talking about? That like sunset, just figuring out what's going on and how to help de-escalate situations. I've learned so much, on and on. And here's an interesting one. I learned not to worry about what other people were thinking. So one time I took my mom to a botanical gardens here where we live with a friend of mine. And because my mom was in a wheelchair and she wasn't verbal, but I thought, how can we provide quality? Take her to botanical gardens, show her around, let her see the colors and the flowers, and then take her for a meal. And at that point, she also couldn't manage a fork. And so I was feeding her, and I was talking to a friend, and I was feeding her. And then dessert time came, and I saw ice cream on the menu. I'm like, oh, my mom will like that. It's easy to feed her that, right? Mm-hmm. And so we're in a botanical gardens restaurant, which is, high end, very expensive, white linen tablecloths, the whole bit. I get her ice cream, and I'm feeding her, and my friend says something, and I look over, and I look back. My mother, impatient, has taken the entire scoop of ice cream and shoved it in her I thought, oh, here we are. This is what we're doing now. And I just said, oh, that's tasty ice cream, isn't it, Mom? And then, a server walked past, and I said, I'm sorry, would you mind getting me a warm, wet towel and a dry towel? And the person kind of looked at my mom like, yeah, okay, scurried away. But I didn't look around to see who was watching.
Oh, yeah.
It made no difference to me.
Mhm.
That's where my mom was at that time, and she was enjoying that ice cream.
Yeah.
And I understand that that's not the expectation at a high-end restaurant. But I also understand that my mom had a right to go to the botanical gardens and have some quality of life, and that I didn't mean for that to happen. I got slightly distracted, and it happened.
Yeah.
And I just needed to clean it up and preserve some ice cream for her and move on. Right. And so that's something
Absolutely.
else I learned. And so now in business, it's like, this is who I am. This is what's going on right now. And
Yeah. With kids too, right? You had kids, and when they were kind of doing something different, did you
temper
feel the same way?
tantrums,
Like you don't care
grocery
what other
floor.
people. Yeah, you didn't care what people were thinking too, right? Around
Yeah.
that. So it's similar. Like it's unpredictable actions, and you have to learn
And
to.
I think it's incredibly freeing to just give up
Mhm.
on what other people are thinking.
Yes.
Just give up on that and just move forward in your own life.
Yeah.
And the people who look at you and say, "Oh, look at you, messy human being who really cares about the world. I'd like to be your friend." They will show up and they'll be
Yes.
there. And the people who want to judge that will walk away and they'll judge it. And have a nice life.
Right. Yeah, it's so true. And that carries, like you said, at work or anywhere you go, like just be you. Yeah.
Yeah. And learning to speak up. I had to constantly be talking to doctors and making decisions and just, being in it and not being self-conscious. Right. So now going to meetings, I'm like, I'm in a meeting and I'm in it. And I'm not worried about all the other things. And I'm there for a reason. I have a purpose. And yeah, I've learned, a great deal.
So after your mom passed, how did you deal with that grief? I mean, because with dementia, we're already grieving every day as if like, because we're losing them, they're like evolving and changing. So one day they're good and one day they're bad. But after the end of her passing, how did you deal with that grief?
So
Ultimate grief, I guess.
Yeah, I'm a storyteller and a story coach, and I one of the things I've studied is narrative practice. And one of the things we do in narrative practice is when we or one thing we can do, depends on the person, but when you lose someone, you want to find a way to carry them with you. And I'll actually use my grandmother as an example. So my grandmother, she's a little mischievous, right? She's always, egging me on, get a little bit of trouble here, a little bit of trouble there. Life should be adventurous and exciting.
Take some risks, yeah.
Right? Take some risks. And so when my grandmother passed, I've always thought about her sitting on my shoulder. Whenever there's an adventure to be had, she's the one whispering in my ear, going, do it, go do it, go do it. And she comes forward with me in that spirit. Because she was such an integral part of my life, and she gave me that, and so I carry her with me in that. And so when my mom passed, same thing, right? How do I carry my mother forward with me? Because yes, her body is gone, but there's huge parts of her that live in me and live with me, and that I can carry forward and I can honor and remember in my life. And I get to choose how I do that. And so I'm not saying don't be angry and sad and all those other things that grief may bring you. That's not what I'm saying. Yes, as my mother said, delve into them, feel them fully. But then, also find, if your loved one was a jokester, right? Find a way to carry that forward in honor of them. If they were an adventurer, or if they were, a wise, gentle soul, like find a way to carry that piece of them forward with you. And that way they live with you.
Yes.
Instead of, a lot of the traditional is, you're lost, get over it, move on. It's like, no, I'll never get over my mother. I'm going to carry her with me.
Yes.
That feels more complete to me.
Yes, that's really beautiful. And like their memory then carries forward too.
Yeah.
Like, because they're just remarkable human beings, right? A lot of people that pass, and like if we just leave that, then it's such a shame, right?
Yeah, and I get to be that legacy.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, it's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, because grief is not an easy post road after all that, right? Yeah.
No, and you have to feel all the feelings first, right?
Absolutely, to process that, yeah, and then to carry the bits that are meaningful forward. Love it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Now that we're closing in on the end of our podcast here, our interview, what's one message you want to share with other caregivers today?
The caregiving journey can be a very long one. It can lose you friends, lose you work opportunities. It loses you, in the end, it loses you the loved one as well. So there can be a lot of loss. I lost, my mom lost friends. I lost supporters. I lost work opportunities. There was a lot of loss, right? And it can get heavy and it can feel heavy. So as you're going through it, you want to also think about what the wins are. I became a highly organized person. I became very purposeful. I lost my fear of what others were thinking. I had to come out of that not working, and then at some point in my life, I needed to re-enter the workforce, and a lot of people were like, "Oh, you'll never, you're too late." It's like I had this undying faith in myself, and so that's what you need to find. You need to find and build up this undying faith in yourself, and recognize all the things that you are learning that you can carry forward in your life, in new relationships, in new working situations, in new situations entirely. Allow that journey to carry you, feel the losses, feel the pain, but also find the positives, the things that you're going to be able to carry forward and become that better person, a better business owner, a better whatever you want to do with your life. That's what I would say, that see both sides. It's easy to get lost.
Absolutely. And it's good to see the positive, especially where we're growing to and all this. But yeah, it's so important to feel the feelings, right?
Yes.
To work through that and process that, because otherwise you have that risk of blowing up
feel the pain. And it's funny, that's something I learned from my mom. I remember before she had Alzheimer's, I'd call her and I'm like, this happened and I'm really upset. And she'd say, Melody, turn on the saddest music you can find, sit on your sofa and cry it out and give yourself a good, depending on how big it is, 5 minutes, an hour, a couple of days, whatever it is, sit and then but feel it, dig into it, enjoy being sad about it if you have to, but then put it aside and move on with your life. And that was my mother's advice. And I used that when I was looking after her as well.
So much wisdom carried through that experience.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. Well, Melody, thank you so much for your time and sharing your experience here. I'm sure a lot of the audience here would get a lot out of this talk because you shared so many good tidbits of your growth and your experience and how you asked for help and the support that you needed. And we all could use a little bit more support here.
Thank you, Kelly, so much. Really appreciate it. It's really important to me to speak up and advocate and give both sides of the story, right? And allow people to find the both sides of the story. There's the negative and the challenges, but there's also the positive and the light, right? And I think it's important to bring them both together and be that complete human being. So thank you for allowing me to do that. It's important to me.
Yes, thank you for being open to sharing that, because it's not easy to revisit, right? An old loss. It's a loss that's like it's going to stick with us. Yeah.
No, I get it. My mom's birthday was actually Christmas Eve, and so one of the hardest days of the year for me is Christmas Eve. And everyone's like, "Yay, Christmas Eve!" And I often just want to be by myself and don't want to go to party. People are like, "Would you like to?" No, I'm just gonna have some quiet remembering time on Christmas Eve. But then Christmas Day I celebrate, right? But yeah, so I get that. Yeah,
that's beautiful. Yeah, take some time to honor her memories of her.
Yeah.
Well, I'll speak to you soon then. Take care of yourself. Thanks again.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.